In just 52 seconds, one of British television's most beloved hosts completely demolished a Duchess on live TV, exposing contradictions and half-truths that left viewers absolutely stunned. What started as a simple conversation about charity work turned into an explosive showdown that ended with Meghan Markle storming off the set of This Morning, her microphone ripped off, her composure shattered, and Alison Hammond sitting there with her arms crossed, refusing to back down. Before we get into this absolute car crash of an interview, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We post daily videos exposing the royal family's darkest scandals, the lies, the cover-ups, and the drama they don't want you to see. Hit that subscribe button now. Last night's episode of This Morning was supposed to be a straightforward chat. Meghan Markle had agreed to appear on the show to discuss her latest charitable initiative, something about empowering young women through digital literacy. The producers thought it would be a nice, soft segment to fill the morning slot. Alison Hammond, known for her warm personality and infectious laugh, seemed like the perfect host to make Meghan feel comfortable. But what nobody expected was that Alison had done her homework, and she wasn't about to let certain things slide. The interview started normally enough. Meghan walked onto the set wearing an expensive beige outfit, all smiles and waves to the studio audience. Alison greeted her with a hug, and they both sat down on the bright orange sofa that This Morning is famous for. The cameras rolled, and Alison opened with some pleasant questions about Meghan's new project. "So, Meghan, tell us about this wonderful initiative you're launching," Alison said, her voice full of enthusiasm. Meghan smiled that practiced smile of hers and launched into her prepared speech. "Well, Alison, I'm so passionate about giving young women the tools they need to succeed in today's digital world. Growing up, I didn't always have access to the resources I needed, and I want to change that for the next generation." Alison nodded along, but something in her expression shifted slightly. "That's interesting you say that, because I've read that you actually went to a very expensive private school in Los Angeles, didn't you?" Meghan's smile faltered for just a second. "Well, yes, but that doesn't mean everything was handed to me on a silver platter. I still had to work incredibly hard." Of course," Alison said, still friendly, but her tone had changed just a bit. "I'm just trying to understand, because you often talk about struggling and not having resources, but your background seems quite privileged compared to most people watching right now." You could see Meghan stiffen in her seat. "I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, Alison. Just because someone goes to a good school doesn't mean they don't face challenges. I faced racism. I faced discrimination. I faced people doubting me at every turn." Alison leaned back and crossed her arms, a gesture that regular This Morning viewers would recognize as her "I'm not buying this" pose. "Right, but we're talking about resources, aren't we? You mentioned not having access to resources, but you had access to very good schools. You had a successful career in television. You married into the royal family. I think a lot of people watching would say, that's quite a lot of resources, wouldn't they?" The studio audience was silent now, sensing that something was shifting. Meghan laughed, but it was a forced laugh, the kind you do when you're trying to seem unbothered but you're actually quite bothered. "I don't think you're really listening to what I'm trying to say here." "Oh, I'm listening," Alison replied, and there was an edge to her voice now that hadn't been there before. "I'm listening very carefully. I'm just asking questions that I think our viewers want answered." Meghan shifted in her seat, uncrossing and recrossing her legs. "Look, this interview was supposed to be about my charity work, not about attacking my character." "I'm not attacking anyone, love," Alison said, her Birmingham accent getting stronger as it always did when she was getting heated. "I'm asking reasonable questions. You came on This Morning, our viewers are watching, and they deserve to hear honest answers, don't they?" The tension was building now, thick enough to cut with a knife. The camera operators were glancing at each other, unsure if they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. The producers in the control room were frantically discussing what to do, but they kept the cameras running because they knew this was television gold. Meghan tried to regain control of the conversation. "I think what you're doing right now is exactly the problem. Every time I try to use my platform for good, people like you try to tear me down." "People like me?" Alison repeated, her eyebrows shooting up. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I mean, people who are determined to misunderstand me, to twist my words, to make me look bad no matter what I do," Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. Alison shook her head. No, 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 you said people like me. And I want to know what you meant by that. Are you suggesting something about me personally? I'm not suggesting anything, Meghan shot back. I'm stating a fact. The media, including shows like this, have been unfair to me from the start. Hang on a minute, Alison said, holding up her hand. This morning has been nothing but respectful to you. We invited you here to talk about your charity. I'm asking you normal questions that any journalist would ask. If you can't handle basic questions about your own statements, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. That comment hit a nerve. Meghan's carefully composed expression cracked, and you could see genuine anger flash across her face. You have no idea what I've been through. You have no idea what it's like to be scrutinized every single day, to have every word you say twisted and turned against you. Alison leaned forward now, and her voice was firm but not unkind. Actually, love, I do know. I'm a black woman in British media. I've been in this industry for years. I've faced racism. I've faced discrimination. I've had people doubt me and try to tear me down, but I don't go around acting like I'm the only person who's ever struggled. And I certainly don't claim I didn't have resources when I clearly did. The audience gasped. This was unprecedented for this morning. Alison Hammond, usually so cheerful and lighthearted, was not backing down. She was calling out one of the most famous women in the world on live television, and she wasn't going to apologize for it. Meghan's face was red now. How dare you compare your experience to mine? You have no idea what I've been through in that family. You're right, I don't, Alison agreed. But that's not what we're talking about, is it? We're talking about you claiming you didn't have resources when you clearly did. We're talking about you presenting yourself as some kind of underdog when you've actually been incredibly privileged for most of your life. I earned everything I have, Meghan snapped. Nobody gave me anything. Alison laughed, a short, sharp laugh. Come off it. You married a prince. That's not earning something, that's marrying into something. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but don't sit here and pretend you're self-made when you're not. The studio was electric now. Some audience members were nodding in agreement with Alison. Others looked shocked that this was happening. The producers had given up trying to control the situation and were just letting it play out. Meghan stood up slightly in her seat, as if she was preparing to leave. I don't have to sit here and take this abuse. It's not abuse, it's accountability, Alison said calmly. There's a difference. You came on this show to promote yourself and your charity, and I'm asking you fair questions. If you can't answer them, that's on you, not on me. Fair questions? Meghan's voice was getting louder now. You've been attacking me since I sat down. I've been asking you to explain contradictions in your own statements, Alison corrected. That's literally my job as an interviewer. If you only want to do interviews where people throw soft questions at you and tell you how amazing you are, then maybe you should stick to American talk shows. That was the line that did it. Meghan's face went from red to almost purple. You know what? I'm done. I'm absolutely done with this. Done with what? Alison asked. Done with being asked questions? Done with people like you who are determined to bring me down, Meghan said, her voice shaking now with anger. I came here in good faith to talk about helping young women, and you've turned this into an attack. Alison remained seated, her arms still crossed, looking completely unbothered by Meghan's outburst. I haven't attacked you once. I've asked you questions. If you feel attacked by simple questions, that's something you need to think about. Meghan was fully standing now, ripping the microphone pack from her belt. This is exactly why Harry and I left the UK. Because of people like you. Because of this constant negativity and tearing people down. Oh, here we go, Alison said, rolling her eyes slightly. The victim card. Every time someone challenges you, out comes the victim card. I am a victim, Meghan shouted, and the entire studio went silent. I am a victim of racist abuse, of media harassment, of institutional cruelty, and now of this ambush on your show. Alison stood up now too, matching Meghan's energy. This wasn't an ambush. An ambush is when you don't know the questions are coming. You knew we'd ask about your charity work. You knew we'd ask about your statements. What you wanted was a puff piece. And that's not what This Morning does. You're damn right this isn't what This Morning does, Meghan said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What This Morning does is tear down successful women, particularly women of color, to make yourself feel better. Alison's expression hardened. Don't you dare play that card with me. Don't you dare stand there and accuse me, a black British woman who has actually faced real racism in this industry, of being racist because I asked you difficult questions. That is absolutely disgusting, and you should be ashamed of yourself. The audience actually started applauding at that. Not the whole audience, but enough people that it was noticeable. Meghan looked around, shocked that people were clapping for Alison and not supporting her. This is unbelievable, Meghan said, shaking her head. This is absolutely unbelievable. What's unbelievable? Alison said, her voice strong and clear. Is that you come on television. You make claims about your life. You ask people to support your charities. But the moment someone asks you to back up your claims or explain contradictions, you throw a tantrum and call it abuse. That's what's unbelievable. Meghan grabbed her handbag from beside the sofa. I don't have to listen to this. I have lawyers. And trust me, you'll be hearing from them. Alison laughed again, and this time it was genuine. Oh, please. Sue me for what? Asking questions? Good luck with that, love. British libel law is pretty clear. Truth is an absolute defense. We'll see about that, Meghan said, her voice icy now. Yes, we will, Alison replied calmly. And while we're seeing about that, why don't you think about why you can't handle basic scrutiny? Why every single interview has to be on your terms, with your approved questions, with no pushback whatsoever? That's not how journalism works. That's not how the real world works. Meghan was walking toward the exit now, her heels clicking loudly on the studio floor. You know what, Alison? I actually feel sorry for you. Save your pity, Alison called after her. I don't need it, and I don't want it. Meghan spun around one last time. You're just another bully. Another person who gets their kicks from tearing others down. I hope you're happy with yourself. I'm very happy, actually, Alison said, sitting back down on the sofa. I sleep well at night, because I know I tell the truth, and I don't let people manipulate the narrative just because they're rich and famous. You're going to regret this, Meghan said, pointing her finger at Alison. You're going to regret treating me this way. The only thing I regret, Alison said, is that we wasted valuable airtime giving you a platform when you clearly weren't prepared to have an honest conversation. Meghan let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. Honest? You wouldn't know honest if it hit you in the face. And you would? Alison shot back. Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent this entire interview dodging questions, playing the victim, and accusing me of being things I'm not, just because I didn't bow down and worship you like you expected. The studio crew was frozen, unsure whether to intervene. This had gone far beyond a typical interview disagreement. This was a full-blown confrontation. And it was all being captured on live television. I came here to do something good, Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly now. I came here to talk about helping people. And you've turned it into this circus. You turned it into a circus the moment you couldn't answer a simple question honestly, Alison replied. All you had to do was say, yes, I've been privileged in many ways, and now I want to use that privilege to help others. That's it. That's all you had to say. But you couldn't do that, could you? Because you're so invested in this narrative of yourself as someone who's struggled against all odds that you can't admit the truth. Meghan's hands were shaking now, whether from anger or something else. It was hard to tell. The truth? You want the truth? The truth is that people like you have made my life hell. The truth is that I can't go anywhere, can't do anything, without being criticized and attacked. The truth is that I've contemplated ending my own life because of the constant barrage of hatred, and here you are, adding to it. The studio went completely silent at that. It was a heavy statement, and for a moment even Alison seemed to soften slightly. But then she spoke, and her voice was firm. If that's true, and I genuinely hope it's not, then you need professional help, not television interviews. But you can't use mental health struggles as a shield against legitimate questions. That's not fair to people who actually suffer from mental health issues. Meghan's mouth fell open. How dare you question my mental health struggles? I'm not questioning them, Alison said. I'm saying they're separate from what we're talking about. You can be struggling with mental health and still be held accountable for contradictions in your public statements. One doesn't cancel out the other. You're a horrible person, Meghan said, her voice barely above a whisper now, but somehow more cutting than when she'd been shouting. "You're a truly horrible person." Alison didn't flinch. "I can live with that assessment from you. I really can." Meghan turned to leave again, then turned back once more. "You know what the worst part is? Women should be supporting other women. Especially women of color should be supporting each other. But here you are, tearing me down for ratings." "Don't," Alison said sharply. "Don't you dare try to make this about women supporting women. That's manipulation. Real support doesn't mean never asking hard questions or never holding each other accountable. Real support means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. And honestly, you need to hear what I'm saying." "What I need," Meghan said coldly, "is to get as far away from you as possible." "Then go," Alison said simply. "Nobody's stopping you. The door's right there." Meghan stared at her for a long moment, and you could see she was trying to think of something else to say, some final cutting remark that would let her leave with the upper hand. But nothing came. Instead, she just turned on her heel and marched toward the studio exit. "And Meghan?" Alison called after her. Meghan paused, but didn't turn around. "Next time you want to lecture people about their privilege and resources, maybe check your own first." That was the final straw. Meghan whipped around, and for a second it looked like she might actually walk back over to Alison. Her face was twisted with rage, her fists clenched at her sides. But then she seemed to catch herself, seemed to remember that cameras were rolling and people were watching. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and said in a voice that was trying very hard to sound dignified but came out shaky, "You'll be hearing from my lawyers." "Looking forward to it," Alison replied cheerfully. And with that, Meghan Markle stormed out of the This Morning studio. The heavy doors slammed behind her with a bang that echoed through the silent studio. For a moment, nobody moved. The audience sat frozen, unsure if they should applaud or remain quiet. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. Alison Hammond sat back down on the orange sofa, let out a long breath, and looked directly into the camera. "Well," she said, and a smile was starting to creep across her face. "That was interesting, wasn't it?" The audience finally broke into applause, and this time it was loud and sustained. Some people were standing up, clapping and cheering for Alison. She waved her hand to quiet them down, but you could see she was pleased. "We're going to take a quick break," she said to the camera. "And when we come back, we'll be talking about the best ways to organize your kitchen cupboards, which I promise will be significantly less dramatic than what you just witnessed." The studio lights dimmed slightly as they cut to commercial, and Alison finally allowed herself to fully smile. She had just done something that very few television presenters would have dared to do. She had challenged one of the most famous women in the world, refused to back down, and stood her ground even when threatened with lawsuits and accusations. And she had done it all live on morning television. As Meghan's car pulled away from the studio, tires screeching slightly as it sped off, Alison sat on that sofa and knew that this interview would be replayed, analyzed, and discussed for weeks, if not months, to come. She had asked the questions that many people had been thinking but were too afraid to ask. She had refused to treat Meghan differently just because of her title or her fame. She had done her job as a journalist, plain and simple. The door to the studio opened again, but this time it wasn't Meghan coming back. It was the show's producer, rushing over to check on Alison. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern and excitement. "I'm brilliant," Alison said, and she meant it. "Absolutely brilliant." "That was incredible television," the producer said, already thinking about the ratings and the headlines. "Absolutely incredible." "It was just an interview," Alison said with a shrug, though they both knew it was much more than that. "She came on to promote her charity. I asked her some questions. She couldn't handle it. Simple as that." But it wasn't simple, and everyone in that studio knew it. What had just happened was a moment of television history. A moment where a host had refused to play along with a carefully managed public image, and had instead insisted on truth and accountability. A moment where someone had said what many had been thinking but were too polite or too scared to say. Outside the studio, Meghan Markle sat in the back of her car, her hands still shaking, her mind racing with anger and humiliation. She pulled out her phone and immediately started texting her PR team, her lawyers, anyone who could help her manage this disaster. because that's what it was, a complete disaster. She had walked into that studio thinking she would get the same treatment she usually got, soft questions and sympathetic nods. Instead, she had been confronted with hard truths and hadn't been able to handle it. Back in the studio, Alison was getting her makeup touched up during the commercial break. Her phone was already blowing up with messages from friends, colleagues, and even some celebrities congratulating her on the interview. Social media was going absolutely mental, with clips of the confrontation already being shared thousands of times. Some people were praising Alison for her courage, others were defending Meghan and calling Alison terrible names. But that was the nature of modern media. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone wanted to share it. "We're back in 30 seconds," a crew member called out. Alison took a sip of water, straightened her posture, and prepared to continue with the rest of the show as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Because that was the thing about live television. You couldn't dwell on what just occurred. You had to keep moving forward, keep the show going, keep the energy up. As the cameras came back on and Alison started talking about kitchen organization tips with her next guest, Meghan Markle's car was pulling onto the motorway, heading back to London. She was already mentally preparing her response, already thinking about how to spin this, how to make herself the victim once again. But this time, it was going to be harder. This time, people had seen her unable to answer simple questions. They had seen her throw a tantrum when challenged. They had seen her play every card in her deck, the victim card, the race card, the mental health card, and they had seen none of it work against Alison Hammond's straightforward questioning. The interview was over, but the fallout was just beginning. And somewhere in that studio, sitting on that sofa, Alison Hammond knew she had just changed the conversation about accountability, celebrity, and truth in media.